All right, let's get right into it. Today we are tackling one of the most foundational and frankly one of the most controversial claims in all of Christianity, the idea that Jesus Christ is the one and only way to God.
And this is where it all starts, with this incredibly direct statement from Jesus himself. You'll notice this isn't a parable, it's not a suggestion. It's laid out as an absolute fact. This verse right here, it's the bedrock for this entire idea.
And look, the wording here is everything. He didn't say he was a way among many good options. He didn't say he was just a really good path you could take. The claim is to be the way, the truth, and the life. The language is just so specific, it leaves zero room for other interpretations.
Now, this idea of a single narrow road, it isn't something that came along later or that somebody made up. No, it is the original, foundational claim that the entire Christian faith was built on from the very beginning.
And it wasn't just Jesus saying this. The apostles, the guys who actually went out and built the early church, they echoed this with total conviction. For them, it was crystal clear. There was no alternative.
Think about this for a second. This wasn't some abstract idea for them or a topic for a debate. It was a truth so real, so profound, that they were willing to die for it. And many of them did. That kind of commitment just shows you how non-negotiable this was from day one.
Okay, so let's jump forward to today, because what we're seeing now is a huge shift, a massive, widespread rejection of that exact same foundational truth.
And this is pretty shocking. Get this, over 60% of young people who call themselves born-again Christians, people who claim to have a personal commitment to the faith, now believe that other religions can also lead to heaven. That is a gigantic departure from what the church has always taught.
So, you have to understand, from a theological standpoint, this isn't seen as just some simple confusion. When the original statement is so clear, rejecting it is considered a conscious choice. It's a direct rebellion against the plain words of Christ.
And the weight of denying this is, well, it's huge. The logic is simple. If Jesus said, "I am the only way," and someone comes along and says, "Nope, there are other ways," then you are, by definition, calling Jesus a liar. And there's a serious theological word for that: blasphemy.
So this all begs a really important question. What happens when this central belief gets tossed aside? What's actually at stake when we start compromising on the exclusivity of Christ?
I mean, really, let's follow that thought. If there are other roads that lead to God, what does that do to the rest of the Christian faith? What are the ripple effects?
Well, it's like knocking over the first domino. The whole thing starts to fall apart. If other religions work just as well, then the cross wasn't a necessary sacrifice, it was a pointless tragedy. The martyrs didn't die for a unique truth, they died for a preference. Sending missionaries to share the gospel becomes this cruel, arrogant thing to do. And Christianity itself, it just gets downgraded to a personal hobby, like collecting stamps.
So here's the bottom line. When you take away the exclusivity of Christ, you don't get a nicer, softer version of Christianity. You're left with a faith that has no core message, no real purpose, and no power. You're left with no gospel at all. So you might be asking, how in the world did we get here? How did such a fundamental part of the faith get so eroded? Let's look at what's seen as the roots of this decline.
Well, it's seen as a perfect storm of a few things. First, our culture prizes tolerance above almost everything else, and it sees any kind of exclusive truth claim as arrogant. So what happened? Some seminaries started backing away from teaching absolutes. A lot of churches, worried about offending people, softened their message, and this idea of kindness got all tangled up with doctrinal compromise.
You know, there's this powerful way of looking at it. The church was meant to be a lighthouse, this steady, unchanging beam of truth that guides people. But what's happened, in many places, is that it's become a mirror, just reflecting whatever the culture around it happens to believe at the moment.
And when a church goes down this path, the cost is just catastrophic. It loses its mission, its whole reason for being. It forfeits its unique message. It makes Christ smaller. And maybe worst of all, it ends up just making people feel comfortable on a path that leads to destruction instead of showing them the one way out.
Okay, so if that's the problem, what's the solution? What's the way forward? How can this foundational truth be brought back to the center?
You know, the first thing is to completely reframe what we think truth is. Think about it. If a building is on fire, shouting, "This is the only way out," isn't arrogant, it's merciful. If a ship is sinking, pointing to the only lifeboat isn't exclusive, it's an act of love. It's a rescue.
So, the way back, it really boils down to four things that must be recovered. First, absolute clarity in preaching this truth. Second, real courage in sharing it, even when it's not popular. Third, a rock-solid conviction in this core doctrine. And finally, and most importantly, a deep and unshakable confidence in Christ himself.
When it's all said and done, it comes down to this simple, unavoidable reality. There is no plan B. There's no backup option. It is Christ and Christ alone, or it's not at all.
And that leaves us, it leaves you, with a choice. A choice that every single person and every single church has to make. Are we going to just echo the shifting opinions of the culture? Or are we going to stand with the clear, unchanging, and absolute words of Christ?